Welcome, dear viewer. In this video, we're going to explore an alternate history of Just Cause 3, in which MEDICI is invaded by NATO powers in order to topple the authoritarian government. We'll examine the logistics and tactics of this hypothetical invasion, and consider how it might have changed the outcome of the game's storyline. Just Cause 3 is known for its over-the-top action and explosive gameplay, but in this alternate history, we'll take a closer look at the political and military dimensions of the conflict. So, let's dive in and imagine a world in which MEDICI's fate is determined not by a lone rebel, but by the forces of a global military alliance. In this alternate history version of Just Cause 3, we need to have in mind the fact that MEDICI's government became increasingly authoritarian and hostile towards neighboring countries in the Mediterranean. The world's leaders, concerned about the destabilizing effect this regime could have on the region, decided to take action. In 2016, NATO powers launched a military invasion of MEDICI, with the aim of removing the authoritarian government and stabilizing the country. The invasion was codenamed Operation Firestorm, and it involved a massive deployment of troops, warplanes, and naval vessels. The initial phase of the operation was a lightning-fast assault on MEDICI's military installations, including its air and sea defenses, communication networks, and command and control structures. Once the regime's military had been neutralized, NATO forces would have focused on securing air and sea superiority over the country. This would have involved deploying fighter jets, helicopters, and naval vessels to prevent the regime from launching counterattacks. The American Sixth Fleet would easily outnumber the Medici Navy, but, on the other hand, the Medici Air Force has the most capable pilots in the region, with the Hirondine Squadron fiercely repelling air raids with a considerable fleet of airplanes, at least for a while. Eventually NATO with the far superior F-22 fighter jets managed to gain total air superiority over the island. With air and sea superiority, establishing a beachhead would be the next step. In order to establish a foothold in the country, NATO forces would have needed to secure a beachhead from which they could launch further operations. This would have involved identifying a suitable landing area, clearing it of enemy forces, and establishing a secure perimeter. This landing would have taken place in Porto La Grazia, since they could easily resupply from that well-defended naval base. Once a beachhead had been established, NATO forces would have needed to rapidly deploy ground forces to key areas across the country. This would have involved transporting troops, vehicles, and equipment by air and sea to strategic locations. The regime's forces, while initially putting up a fierce resistance, were quickly overwhelmed by the superior technology and firepower of the invading armies. As the fighting raged on, the NATO powers established a provisional government in MEDICI, consisting of local leaders who had opposed the regime, with Rosa Manuela as the new head of state. With the support of the invading armies, Manuela's government quickly gained the trust of the local population, who were tired of the regime's brutal repression. In a few short weeks, the NATO powers had succeeded in toppling the authoritarian government of MEDICI and stabilizing the country. With the help of international aid, the new government began the task of rebuilding the shattered nation and establishing democratic institutions. As for Rico Rodriguez, our protagonist, he found himself caught up in the chaos of the invasion. With his unique set of skills and abilities, he proved to be a valuable asset to the NATO forces, and he played a key role in several critical missions. While the invasion was controversial among the international community, it ultimately succeeded in bringing stability to MEDICI and preventing the spread of authoritarianism in the region. Today, MEDICI is a vibrant democracy, with a thriving economy and a rich cultural heritage. the world's leaders look back on Operation Firestorm as a turning point in the fight for freedom and democracy in the 21st century.